But to the new barbarians, these race warriors, now picking fights with statues, now destroying or vandalising them. They must be so pure themselves, these people. Impossibly pure when they now want to tear down statues to people they say are sinners. In Bristol last week, in Britain, students tore down a statue of Edward Colston and then threw it in the harbour. Then, now, in London, Mayor Sadiq Khan ordered a crane to remove another statue of Robert Milligan. Now, Edward Colston actually got his statue for giving his fortune to endowing schools, churches, hospitals, homes for the poor. Some of the charities still exist. Milligan got his for building the West London docks, which helped to make London much richer. But their statues had to go because they once traded in slaves. Now, I understand slavery is indeed a sin. But how pure, at least by these modern standards, must past great men be for these protesters to be able to tolerate walking past their statues? Well, some even object to the famous statue of Winston Churchill, who only happened to save Britain from Nazi invasion. They say he had racist thoughts because he thought British civilization was more advanced. Meanwhile, in Australia, we've already seen race warriors attack statues of explorer James Cook. They think this great man was actually a racist, genocidal even, for being the first European to map our east coast, because that helped Britain, years later, colonise the country. And as for the statue of Lachlan Macquarie, well, that had to be vandalised too because they claimed he was a murderer. But now Black Lives Matter protesters are complaining about other statues as well. An organiser of the Adelaide March said even the one in Adelaide of Charles Cameron Kingston, a former South Australian Premier, that should go because just seeing it was a mental health trigger for Aborigines. But I have to say, it doesn't take much to trigger activists these days, not if they're really looking out everywhere to take offence at something. And they don't bother too much about the facts. I mean, this particular statue, Kingston, that activists like archaeologist Jacinta Kulmatri want removed, is actually of the Premier who first gave women in South Australia the vote. Now is damned as a racist because he said no to importing cheap Chinese workers. Back then, that was seen as a way to actually protect wages of the working man. Now, I get that being uneasy about, I get it, uneasy about some statues that represent a really ugly past. I get it. I'm glad, for instance, that Hungary got rid of all the communist statues in Budapest that the Russians had put up and shipped many off to a park. I get that. I loved it, in fact. Went to the park, loved it. I recommend you see it too. Because the people of Hungary, they don't need reminding of the tyranny that they'd just been living under. And just as Germans didn't want statues of Hitler to hang around anymore. But how far exactly do you go? In the United States, the statue destruction includes several honouring Confederate soldiers. After these race riots, Virginia's governor ordered, in fact, the removal of the statue of the state's most famous son, Confederate leader Robert E. Lee. But in Britain, Black Lives Matter protesters, they've really taken this and stretched it. They've suggested a list of about 60 statues in for the chop, including ones to Sir Francis Drake, who happened to save Britain from the Spanish Armada. You start to wonder whether saving Britain is the real offence here. But he had slaves. And, of course, they want to get rid of a statue to reforming Prime Minister William Gladstone because apparently he's now a racist too. But is there another agenda here? Because I couldn't help but notice that missing from that list of statues that had to be removed, statues of racists and killers and what have you, is the famous statue to Karl Marx at Highgate Cemetery, where he's buried. Black Lives Matter protesters don't want that destroyed, even though Marx created a political creed, Marxism, that has so far killed 100 million people. And he also qualifies as a racist too. I mean, he wrote, "What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering. Oh, huckstering. And what is his worldly god? Money." Classic anti-Semitism. So why are protesters trying to tear down statues of people who at least gave their fortunes to their country, or they saved it from invasion, or they expanded knowledge, or they made democracy better? Why are they wanting those statues torn down, but they're not tearing down Marx's statue, the statue of an enemy of those Western democracies, an enemy of capitalism, a man whose creed destroyed hundreds of millions of lives? But is that statue okay because Marx's contempt for our Western society, our capitalist society, is pretty much the organisers' own?